started. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's video, depending on where you're watching this. And in this video, we are going to be talking about the self-love path, as always, and why self-love is not about developing complete independence, okay? Because a lot of us have been conditioned and trained to believe in our normal lives, in regular society, in our families, in our friends groups, in culture in general, that the more independent we are, the more successful we are, the better we are, the more respectable we are, the more we are doing life right, the more we are lovable, and all of these things. Because we live in a highly individualistic culture that is constantly telling us that the way to be a good person is to take responsibility for yourself, to be your own, person, your own guide, your own guru, to be that you are your own best doctor, you are your own best therapist, you are your own best guide, and that being out in the world, like being successful in just normal culture, means being independently wealthy, it means being independently healthy, it means being as least needy as possible, or so we are told. And like I say, this even bleeds into our spirituality and into our spirituality self-help, self-improvement world, as we're being told over and over and over again that it is spiritual and that it is a good thing to do to be independent, to take care of yourself, to be as self-sufficient as possible, to take as much responsibility for yourself as possible. That if your life doesn't feel how you want it to feel, if you're not getting the results that you want, if you don't feel good, it is because there is something wrong with what you are doing, with the choices you are making, with the things that you are participating in or not participating in, and that the solution is to fix yourself so that you can be more independent, so that you can be more all of these things, and then that's the right thing to do. And on top of that, many of us grew up in households where having needs wasn't safe, where our caregivers made it very obvious to us that they resented us for having needs, that we were told that our needs were too much, that our needs were wrong, that our needs were bad on some level, that we were shameful and guilty. We were told that we were taking too much from them, that we were overburdening them, that their pain and their struggle was our fault for needing too much. Or we were often just abandoned. Our needs just weren't met. And it's not that it was explicitly said that we were harmful or over or too much or had needs that were wrong or any of these things. It's just that we learned through experience that our needs just weren't going to get met, and that the only way for us to get our needs met was to meet them ourselves, or to find some way ourselves to get those needs met, because they weren't going to be met by our caregivers, right? Sometimes it wasn't even that they didn't want to meet our needs or that they didn't strive to meet our needs, but sometimes they were in a situation where they just didn't have the resources, didn't have the understanding, didn't have the capacity to meet our needs. And all of this is kind of this soup that we're swimming in, where a lot of us grew up and then we're culturally conditioned, and then we're spiritually and self-help and self-improvement conditioned to believe that independence is the key, to believe that to be as independent as possible, to have as few needs as possible, to be taking as much responsibility for yourself as possible so that no one needs to help you, no one needs to be on your side, no one needs to sacrifice themselves for you, is the right way to live. Okay? And This is a highly toxic, very painful narrative that we are living with, and that many of us bring into our self-love work because it's the filter, it's the lens we have over our perception, right? So we come into this self-love work not even realizing that we have a foundation of an unhealthy belief around needs, around independence, around what's actually healthy, around what our nervous systems are programmed to do and to be. We don't realize we have that filter. And then we apply that filter to our self-love path and wonder why we keep getting burnt out and feeling like shit and feeling shame and feeling guilt and feeling like we're not doing it good enough and feeling like we're not making progress and all of these things. And it's because we can't even see it because it's the water we're swimming in. So that's why I wanted to illuminate it today, so that we can start to see these filters. We can start to see the reasons we have these belief systems. We can start to see how we're taking these toxic ideas that aren't our ideas. They're not things that we came up with. They're toxic ideas that were handed to us. And we can see how we are importing them into our self-love path and how it's harming us that we're doing that. All right? So this is what we're going to talk about today. Why the self-love path is not a path of trying to become the most independent, needless, self-sufficient version of yourself possible, and why trying to do that will often halt and stall our progress more than actually help it forward in making us feel better. Okay? So again, before we even dive into this, I want to remind you, the point of the self-love path, the point of all of our spirituality, self-help, personal growth, why we work on ourselves, why we pursue spirituality, why we pursue personal growth, why we want to heal our triggers and the things that are flawed in our perception and our childhood wounds and all of these things. Why are we doing it? What's the point? What's the actual bottom line reason for all of this? It is so that we can live lives that feel better. That is why we're doing this. Okay? We need to continually come back to the point. Otherwise, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce and to get lost in feeling like we're failing and we're not doing good enough and we're not achieving enough and that we should be doing it different and that we're not healing fast enough and that we're not having the experience we should be having, that we're bad at self-love, that when we forget to be kind to ourselves, that's a failure. We don't want to be in that territory because, again, that's taking us away from the point. It's taking us away from the reality of this path. And again, the point of this path, the entire reason we do this work, is not to fix ourselves or to change ourselves or to become our ideal version of self or to become a version of self that's totally healed and has transcended all of our past and has no more scapegoats, has no more coping mechanisms, never blames ourselves again, to become this perfect version of ourselves, this healed version of ourselves, whatever we idealize about what we're supposed to become when we're healed. That's not the point. Because again, that healed version of you that you have in your head, this version of you with no triggers, this version of you with no coping mechanism, this version of you that's gotten rid of all of your bad behaviors, this version of you that's healed and never gets triggered again, may or may not ever be someone you actually grow into. You might have triggers for the rest of your life. You may have coping mechanisms that you have that are not the most ideal for the rest of your life. You may have struggles that are struggles, things you don't fully heal in your lifetime. And that is normal and natural and exactly how pretty much all humans are. That is not what is going to determine whether this path was successful when you really get onto the point. That the point is that you are able to respond to yourself differently within all of these things. The point is that you are able to shift out of shame, blame, and guilt so that you can move into a state of self-support. So that you can be there for yourself when you're triggered. You can be there for yourself when you're in a situation that's driving you to need your coping mechanisms. So that you can be kind to yourself when the first pattern that comes up is that you want to shame, blame, and guilt yourself. So that you can shift gears away from your conditioning and the patterns that are harmful towards patterns that are more self-supportive on a regular basis. Because that's the point. The point of the path is being able to have more and more moments in your life where you feel safe and loved and supported, rather than feeling judged or trapped or guilty or shameful. The point of the path is to have more and more connection to yourself, your authenticity, to what is integral for you, and to eventually be in a place where that connection and that love and that safety gives you wider capacity to make different choices when you're triggered, to make different choices when you're hurting, to make different choices when you're overwhelmed and stimulated or in a self-hate spiral or whatever it is. It's so that you can, on a day-to-day basis, feel less and less and less like you're failing. Feel less and less and less like you have to get to this certain place before you're allowed to love yourself. To feel less and less and less like there's this constant goalpost that's moving for when you're allowed to approve of yourself. So that you can approve of yourself now. And then see what happens. See who you become. See what happens to your coping mechanisms and your self-sabotage and your capacity to stand up for yourself and your capacity to be on your own side. This is really what we want to see it flip to, right? It's that we understand that the point is to feel that we are loved and supported more and more and more on a regular basis. That is the point. So that we feel better on a day-to-day basis. That we're not waiting for some perfect outcome before we're finally giving ourselves permission to feel how we want to feel, which is that we are lovable, we are good enough, we are innocent, and we are doing our best. The more we start to see that that's the point, the more we can start to give ourselves permission to feel those things on a regular basis. Because the point of this path is to feel better. It's not to have a new goalpost of things to achieve before I'm allowed to give myself permission to feel these things. That's the point. And then again, like I said, we're going to notice that the more we're living from that place of self-support and kindness and love for who we are right now, not waiting till we're healed, not waiting till we've transcended everything, not trying to say, once I fix all of these things with self-love, then I'll love myself. And coming to a place where we're saying, no, I'm giving myself permission to love who I am right now. I'm giving myself permission to feel like I can support myself instead of trying to fix myself right now. I'm letting myself process my emotions today. I'm letting myself express how I'm feeling today. I'm letting myself make choices that align with what I actually want versus what I've been told I should want or what I should do a little bit more today. I'm in my coping mechanism today, but today I'm just not going to blame myself. The more we do that, the more we're going to see that this path actually does transform our behavior. It makes it easier for us to find new and better ways to support ourselves. We come out of that shame, blame, and guilt, and it does change the way that we live. But not because we're trying to force ourselves to change. We're going to see that the more we just support the version of ourselves that exists right now, the more we will start to see that we don't have to become this ideal version of self in order to be worthy of the feelings we want to have. We can have those feelings right now. And then the more we allow ourselves to have those feelings, the easier it is to shift into healthier ways of being. We don't have to force it. We don't have to push it. And then this in turn will make us different people in the world. It will shift the way we interact with other people. It will shift the way we interact with our communities. It will shift us out of that state of fear and isolation and independence and self-blame and self-shame and navel-gazing and all of these things, so we can actually be productive members of society in a way that's actually productive. So it might not be what society says is productive, as in overworking, over-consuming, contributing to the economy, but it will be what is actually productive in terms of creating a new culture and a new way of life that's actually supportive of life. The more you do this work for yourself, the more you're going to start to be able to identify what's unhealthy in culture. And the more you are going to have the capacity to start to be a positive influence on culture. That's why this path is not just about you. The more you are giving yourself permission to feel safe and loved for who you are right here, right now, the more you are going to find that your habits change naturally without having to force yourself, because you feel safe. And from that place of safety, you are naturally going to find that growth happens. And when growth happens in your individual self, you cannot help but see that that growth changes how you interact with the world around you, with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers, with the things that you buy, with the things that you contribute to, the things you don't contribute to. It's going to shift all of these things. And then you are going to be the kind of person that is contributing to the world that you want to see, without having to go on an ayahuasca journey and have all this idea of what's your purpose and all that stuff. You'll find it simply by living what feels right for you. That's how you find your purpose. It's day to day, moment to moment. What aligns with what feels good to me? What aligns with what feels supportive for me? If I'm not blaming and shaming myself, what are my actual emotions telling me? What is my body telling me? You see, it's this whole, that's the point. You start to let yourself feel like you are loved and good enough for who you are right here, right now. And everything comes from that. That's the point of the path. Okay? That is the point of the path. That means the point of the path is not to become as needless and perfect and independent as possible. All right? So again, we've talked about this in lots of other videos, but I really want to talk about it again today because it is so important. This is vital, vital, vital for us to understand, for us to have an underlying true awareness of ourselves as a humanity, and why what we're currently doing in our culture is leading to so much pain, and how that pain is being manipulated, how we are being manipulated within that pain to believe that the pain we are experiencing is because we are failing to live up to what is correct in culture. Instead of being able to say, no, the reason we are all experiencing pain in culture is because culture is wrong. The pain we have is not a sign that we are broken and we are failing and there's something wrong with us. The pain we have is there to say, red flag, what we're doing in culture isn't working. And we need to shift culture. All right? So, again, this is vital information to understand. Our human nervous systems, for almost all of our time as being humans, all of our evolution, from the time that humans began being humans, however you believe that happened, that's on you. I'm not telling you how that happened. You believe whatever you believe. But we have been evolving, growing, changing, adapting to different environments, different circumstances, different brain developments for hundreds of thousands of years. And for almost all of that time, humans lived, worked, raised children, and thrived together. There was no nuclear family, mom, dad, 2.5 kids, and you just keep to yourself in your little house, and everyone just pretends like everything's fine and we meet all of our needs this way. That was not a reality. That was not a way of life. That was not a lifestyle choice until the 1950s. So literally from the time humans became humans, hundreds of thousands of years ago, to like less than 100 years ago, 100 years ago, give or take, we lived in groups. We lived in connected communities. We lived in a situation where food production and collection happened together in the group, where children were raised not just by mom and dad, but by the whole community, by neighbors, by aunts, by grandparents. There were elders, there were groups of friends. Children were cared for, and parents were cared for by the community. We learned together. We learned together. It wasn't just independent study. It wasn't like it is in school. It wasn't this kind of get up 9 to 5, go to bed, right? We learn from reality. We learn from each other. We learn from interacting with nature and all of these things. So again, not to say that we should just all get out of school and that education isn't good. It's to say there was a way that things were done. There was a system. We grieved together. We went through hard things together. We had a community that we could rely on when things got hard. We had people we could go to when things with our family were shitty. The shamans and the mystical the mystical people of the group were not expected to go and collect their own food. They were often sick and weak and not so great in their physical bodies. And they were cared for by the tribe, by the group. And in return, they gave their counsel. We know from fossil records that for a very, very, very long time, humans in these groups took care of the people in their groups that were sick or mentally different, who weren't as able-bodied or capable as the rest of the group. They weren't thrown to the side. They weren't ignored. They were cared for. They were considered part of the family. And the family took care of them. There was support. That is how our nervous systems evolved. We have not evolved past that. So now, living in the culture that we're living in, where everything is centered around the nuclear family, where more and more and more of us are having less and less contact with actual human beings on a daily basis, where we are expected to be in committed monogamous relationships and have that one person meet all of our needs, where we are expected to raise children as parents and kid, maybe grandparents, with no health care, no child care, no child leave, parental leave, where we are expected to literally do everything on our own. And then, like I say, and then we come into the spirituality, the self-help, and the personal growth movement. And this message is drilled in even harder. It's drilled in even more. That success and being a good person and taking responsibility for yourself means taking as little as possible, needing as little as possible, being responsible for yourself as much as possible. And there is so much shame around not being able-bodied, around not having perfect mental health, around not being normal and financially successful, around not having a partner. That's cloaked in spirituality, that's cloaked in self-help, because we all have these deep guttural fears of not being perfectly healthy, of not having perfect mental health, of not having the partner, the relationship, of not being financially abundant, because in our culture, when that is your reality, you suffer. In our hyper-individualistic culture, if you are not well in your body, if you are not well in your mind, if you are not coupled up, and if you are not financially abundant, you suffer. So we are all afraid to be in those positions. And self-help, spirituality, and personal growth often comes in and says, don't worry, you can control that. Right? Get the right job, have the right diet, make all the right choices, do all the inner work, change your mind, go to therapy, fix yourself so that you can become as able-bodied, as normal-minded, partnered, and rich as possible. Because this is what benefits corporations. This is what benefits governments that have only interest in enriching themselves. The more people can just show up for work every day, the more people are willing to invest in product after product after product after product, in service after service after service after service. The more people who do not look to society to build actual sustainable supports for people who don't fit the mold, and the more we demonize those people as being weak and lazy and making all the wrong choices, the more the government can hold money for itself instead of distributing that money to social programs and things that would actually benefit society. And the more corporations just make more and more money hand over foot every quarter because people are working and people are buying. Right? Like this idea that healthcare wants people sick. Not really. Healthcare wants people working. Yes, they want you buying drugs, but they want you working. They don't want you off. They want you to contribute to the economy. So in many ways, when we look at, the drugs that just hide symptoms, doctors that aren't willing to get to root causes, this for-profit medical system that has you in and out in 10 seconds and no one even takes the time to look at you, it's all about money. It's about the profit. It's about getting you back to work. And then again, we look at the wellness culture and oftentimes it's no better. It's not different. It's about playing on your insecurity, telling you, yeah, you're depressed, you're anxious, your digestion doesn't work. Here's this supplement. Here's this retreat you can go on. Here's this never-ending coaching program. Fix yourself. Change yourself. All with the message that if you are not thriving in this hyper-individualist culture, you are failing. And that the point of all of this work is to become as individualistic, self-sustaining, productive, and consumptive as possible. And that is why it's not working. And so, like I say, because a lot of us have this as our perceptual filter, that success, safety, love, all come from being as independent as possible. We come into the self-love path and we don't even realize that we are filtering all of these messages through that lens. We don't realize that we're hearing, in order to be on the path, I need to be perfecting myself. Now I'm just failing at self-love. Right? We don't see this is supposed to be something that helps nourish and support me. Because that's not the message we're used to getting. Our perception is saying, okay, there's something wrong with me. That's the reason I'm in pain. So now I go to the self-love path and, oh, I see. The reason I'm in pain is because I'm blaming myself and shaming myself. So now I'm going to blame and shame myself for every time I blame and shame myself. Instead of saying, no. Compassion for myself when I blame and shame myself. We're coming to the self-love path and we're saying, every time I cope, I'm going to be disappointed in myself that I didn't do some self-supportive thing. No. The self-supportive thing is, okay, I coped today. That's okay. That's what happens when I'm overwhelmed. That's what happens when I get triggered. What did I need? What do I need right now to feel safe and supported and loved in the fact that something triggered me and I needed to cope? Right? We're not seeing it. And then on top of that, we're saying, when I succeed at the self-love path, I will have no needs, I will have no triggers, I will be able to make only perfect decisions for myself, my body will be completely healed, my mind will be completely healed, I'll be in the perfect relationship, and I'll have discovered my purpose and I'll be making millions of dollars. Because that's the perceptual filter we've been handed by culture. And we just bring it to the self-love path, just like we do with anything else. So the real message of the path gets totally lost in the waters of independence. The next thing. This is another thing that we've talked about a lot, but I want to talk about it again. It's again the blue zones. These places on the planet where people regularly live into their hundreds with good health. These healthy pockets on planet Earth where people seem to be thriving. And what do we actually notice about what's consistent among these communities? Because it's not their diet. It's just not. Well, other than, generally speaking, these people eat food that is, generally from the earth. It's not super highly processed. Okay? But we have the vegans of Loma Linda, California, and the people who eat mostly meat and seafood in Sardinia. Like, there's not a lot of crossover in, like, what they're doing diet-wise. There's not necessarily even a lot of crossover in what they're doing fitness-wise or on a body level. So what is it that's keeping these communities living so long when they live such radically different habits with their bodies? The things that are consistent in these cultures is that they live in resource abundant, isolated places on the planet. All of these places that are blue zones have high levels of resources, and they're relatively insulated, so there's not a lot of competition for those resources. So that takes away a huge deal of stress right away. Scarcity just isn't a big part of their experience. So I really want to put that out there. Scarcity, being raised in a situation where you don't have your needs met, being unemployed, not knowing where your next meal is coming from, this is one of the most stressful and aging things that we can go through. And in a culture that is so highly independent, it's a stress that more and more and more of us are facing on a day-to-day basis. Because culture is shitty. Because governments and our systems are set up to continually profit those who are already at the top at the expense of those who are at the bottom. And the more you're in that state of constant stress, the worse your mental state is going to be, the worse your physical state is going to be, the worse your capacity to be in a regulated place is going to be. Not because you're failing, not because there's something wrong with you, but because scarcity is really bad for our systems. And in our culture of hyper independence, scarcity is more and more and more the experience that people are having. So many people out there are anxious and depressed and scared and not doing well in their mental health, not because they're not taking enough responsibility for themselves, not because they're not exercising enough, not because they're not eating the right diet or blah, blah, blah. It's because they're in a culture that if they can't take care of themselves, if they can't provide for themselves, if for some reason society decides they're not valuable, scarcity, because we don't see each other as family. We don't see one another as people we are here to take care of. We see each other as competition, and we see each other as disposable, and as people to step on top of and to trample all over to get our own way. And it's destroying us, physically and mentally. The next thing about the blue zones that's really, really impactful is, again, they see each other as family. They live and work in cultures where it is not the nuclear family and nothing else. The culture is insulated and insular, and so everyone has their role in the group, but you can expect that if something goes wrong with your house, if you get sick, if you need help, you have a community of people that are going to come and help you. You expect that when someone in the community needs something, that you're going to care and you're going to give. So it works both ways. There's a sense of safety and inclusion, and I don't have to be completely independent and absolutely take care of absolutely every little thing in my own way, because if I don't, I'm fucked. There's that security. And then there's also the feeling of purpose and the feeling of connection and the feeling of being in our humanity. That if something happens to a member of our family, our community, we are going to step up. We are going to do something. We're going to contribute. And that provides a feeling of purpose and connection and meaning and value to life that so many of us are now wondering why we don't have that. Right? We're living in this world where we're being told that purpose is that thing you do for money. That thing you do to gain capital so that you don't have to depend on anyone else. That thing you do to gain capital so you can be a good producer and a good consumer. That's what purpose is. But that's not what actually fulfills us as human beings. What fulfills us as human beings is our connection to each other and what we give to those around us. Being connected to our emotions, connected to our humanity in this way. That is what purpose is. So they have a strong sense of the things that I need to live are abundant around me. And they have a strong sense that if shit hits the fan, I have people who are going to be on my side. And they have a strong sense of purpose and meaning and value in the sense that they contribute things to the community. Juxtaposed with what we have, which is isolation. If something bad happens to you, everyone else is so overwhelmed and trained to be disconnected from their humanity that they don't give a shit. And then we don't feel like we have purpose because we're monetizing everything. Even the amount of humanity we try to have, right? The therapy we try and do and the being healers and all that stuff has to fit into this capitalist model where we have to charge money for it. So only those people who are already in a good place can afford it. And the people who need it the most don't have access. And it's this vicious cycle. You see? Connection, resources, and then finally, they put work in its proper place. These cultures don't live to work. They work to live. They do just enough that everyone's needs in the community get met. They're not lazy, right? They build the houses they need. They sell, they fish, they cook, they clean, they do the things. And then, when the work is done, the needs are met, everyone's good, we rest, we relax, we commune, we eat, we do art, we think about things, we read, we philosophize, we go swimming in the ocean. We are human beings. We are connected to something other than consumption and production. That is what is making these cultures live so long. That is why they have better mental health than we do. That is why they have better physical health than we do. They're not stressed. They're not isolated. They're not living for themselves. They're not living to work. They're not in the matrix of productivity being the only thing that matters. They're not in the matrix of being as individualistic as possible. And this is what the self-love path is going to help us establish. When we stop feeling shame, blame, and guilt for the things that are going on in our bodies, the things that are going on in our emotions, when we stop trying to over-pathologize and therapize our response and our reaction to our highly individualistic culture that is toxic in nature, we are going to start to be able to break out of the conditioning that what we have in culture is right, and that if we're not thriving within it, that means we are failing. So that we can see the reason we're not thriving is because culture is toxic. It is not what we are adapted to. It is not what we have evolved to thrive within. That is why we are suffering. So many of us are like, get rid of red dye number 5. That is so the least of our problems. It's obfuscating the problem by leaps and bounds. If we had loving, supportive, connected communities where we took care of each other and the stress of not having enough or having to be isolated all the time wasn't there, most of us could probably eat some shitty cereal and be fine. The body could probably handle that. We're being distracted. Making it, again, about consumer goods. Which cereal do you buy? You see how it's all just the same matrix? That's not choice. That's not freedom. Which cereal are you going to buy? Which corporation are you going to support? Team Oats or Team Wheat? Is seed oil or tallow? It's all the same. Our consumer choices aren't the problem. It's the fact that we think that's the only thing that's wrong and that's the only solution. That's the problem. That it's that entire mindset. That's what the self-love path is designed to help us see. When we feel disconnected, when we don't feel like we have purpose, when we feel constant stress, when we're constantly striving, when we're always scapegoating onto ourselves, I need to fix my body, I need to fix my mind, I need to fix my. What we're really feeling is the insecurity of not having community, not having connection to our humanity. And we're scapegoating it onto all of these things that we're told to scapegoat it onto, instead of being able to see the real issue. It's that we're so isolated. We're so disconnected. And this is why I started this company. This is why I do this work. This is why I get up here and make these free videos every week. Because this shouldn't be gatekept. I never want anyone to be as alone as I was. I never want anyone to be as shamed as I was. Right? For decades, I was shamed for my body, told I was just anorexic, told blah, 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 blah. Turns out I had superior mesenteric artery syndrome. I had mast cell activation syndrome. I'm autistic. I have all of these things. And no one was helping me. And I had to figure all of that out on my own. And I had to survive it. And most people who have what I have are incapacitated, aren't capable of anything. Not because they're weak, not because they're lazy, not because they're not trying hard enough, but because it's devastating to be sick in this culture that doesn't know how to take care of sick people. It's devastating to be in the wellness world that just tells you it's because you're not trying hard enough or you're manifesting it or whatever. I figured out ways of supporting myself so that I could do this. And I never want anyone else to have to do that. It's bullshit. I shouldn't have had to work so hard by myself. And I never want anyone else to have to. This is not working for us. It is not how it's supposed to be. We need more community. We need more connection. Both for our own healing and for the healing of those who are suffering the most. This is what's going to change things. So your path shouldn't be making you more individualistic. It should be helping you see the flaws in our culture. It should be helping you see that no, consumer goods are not the answer. They're not the problem. What we buy, what we eat, what we consume, okay, it plays a role, but it's not why. It's not that therapy is wrong. It's not that medication for mental health issues is wrong. I'm not saying any of those things. What I am saying is, without a culture of community support, we're going to be fixing ourselves so we're blue in the face and nothing is going to change. Because that's not the foundation of the problem. We need to start to look at this from the root, not the fruit, not the symptom. The symptom is the symptom, it's not the problem. This path should not be making us more individualistic. It should be connecting us to our humanity, for how we want to contribute, for how we want to be a part of having empathy for people who are not us, seeing more and more people as being part of who we are, and allowing ourselves to receive more care and love. So yes, we want to learn to be on our own side. Yes, we want to learn to be able to be there for ourselves when no one else can be. Yes, we want to have an inner resource, because that's important, because we're never going to have a perfect community. We're never going to be able to have complete provision. There's no such thing as perfect security and safety on this planet. We have to be able to have an inner resource. But that needs to be coupled with building connection and community. Both of these things are vital. It's not one or the other. So self-love is not about becoming as independent as possible. It's about realizing where community connection is also the key and how we can contribute to that. How we can create that, how we can move towards that, how we can start to look for the people in our lives that we can start to care about and make that our purpose. Okay? It is not about hyper-individualism. That is the problem, not the solution. So let that sink in, see how you feel, think about it. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I'm always open to that. And until next time, I'll see you later. Okay?